Good morning. This morning, I'm talking about love and the process of self-perfection, starting with a quote, a verse from the book Heart, which is an Agni Yoga book, and it's from verse 75. So I'm going to read the verse slowly because it's fairly long, and make a few comments in the process, and then we'll get into the heart. Into the heart of the meaning of the verse. Also keep in mind, one of my joys, having found Agni Yoga and being so drawn into the teachings of the Master, is that it reaches various levels of consciousness. So wherever we are in our thinking, wherever we are in our day-to-day situation, wherever we are in consciousness, that verse will have a level within it that will speak to us. And at the same time, challenge us. Because these teachings are not given to us to confirm what we already know, but to take what we know and catapult us into a more expanded state of consciousness. In that expanded state of consciousness, our life circle increases to include more concepts, more ideals, to be more integrated with other cultures, to the point that eventually that catapulting process takes us into the supermundane worlds. So this teaching is not a teaching given to everyone. You know, a person that wants to stay the same, a person that wants to live in the past will be repulsed by a teaching that is progressive, that is future-oriented, that is evolutionary, in nature. But those who come into incarnation and say, there's got to be more to life than what I am seeing here, they're going to search. And eventually that search, that path, the various stations on the path will lead them to Agni Yoga, which is the newest yoga on the planet today. There will be another yoga that will eventually surpass Agni Yoga, but not yet. The reason being that the frequency of Agni Yoga now is at the frequency of the higher spheres, and in our language it speaks to and is derived from the spiritual triad, which includes the higher mind, the Buddhic level of consciousness, and the Atmic level of consciousness. So those are bodies of consciousness that are there for us to begin to build upon. But we're not there yet. And so Agni Yoga takes us to that next level of consciousness, gives us the pulsation of hierarchy, increases the light of our soul, activates those 12 petals, usually 3 of the petals of the heart, and we begin to see things differently. We begin to think differently. Our life takes on a whole different resonance and purpose than what it did before we reached this particular station, in our life. So let me begin. This is, again, verse 75 from the book Heart. Love, achievement, labor, creativity. And I'm going to do a lot of repetition here. Love, achievement, labor, creativity. These summits of ascent, that means that love and achievement and labor and creativity is requires labor, requires striving, requires dedication, requires commitment, requires the practice of discipline to reach the summit of each of these mountains. So love is a mountain that requires striving to ascend to that mountaintop, to ascend to the mountaintop of achievement, to ascend to the mountaintop of labor, to ascend to the mountaintop of creativity. Love, achievement, labor, creativity can all ask for the action of podvig, heroic action from our beingness. Think about that. Love, achievement, labor, creativity. These summits of ascent maintain the upward strivings regardless of the order in which they developed. So we can develop achievement and creativity and love and labor, not sequentially, but the four must work together at some point. Without a multitude of additional concepts they encompass. And he explains what this means. What is love without self-sacrifice? Think about this. If you're a parent, you can really relate to this. What is love without self-sacrifice? If you're a teacher of a group, if you're the president of a corporation, what is love without self-sacrifice? Or achievement without valor? Valor is courage in battle, daring in battle. So what is achievement without courage, without daring? Labor without patience. You receive an idea and then you have to figure it out. You have to create goals. If this is a visionary idea, you have to work the plan. You have to really work the plan. You have to find people that are willing to help you manifest that plan and establish goals. You have to find people who have the ability to help you in the achievement of this plan, this manifesting plan. And it all requires patience. Creativeness without self-perfectment. They both have to come together. Creativeness without self-perfectment. You have to have the two together. And over this entire legion of benevolent values, the Master says, the heart rules. Isn't that interesting? We hear these colloquialisms of this rules and that rules and so forth. How often do we hear the heart rules? It's so beautiful. Without love, the most patient people, the most valiant, the most striving, and only Master M could get away with this, saying this, will remain cold coffins. Really gets our attention. Without love, the most patient people, the most valiant, the most striving, will remain cold coffins. Now he goes on to say, burdened by knowledge, but unwinged. That means no spirit is involved. They just have a lot of knowledge, but no heart. Will be those who are heartless. Burdened by knowledge, but unwinged will be those who are heartless. It is distressing when someone does not respond to the call in time. Well, we've been talking about the call the last few weeks during conference, what it means to miss the call or to hear the call and not respond. He says it is grievous not to follow the hierarchy completely. In other words, no halfwayness. You're in it completely or you're not. There's no halfwayness. Often people try to hide from themselves the rejection of the hierarchy. This tells us hierarchy can reject our striving, reject our achievements, and so forth. And then he says, cannot you, O traveler, open-heartedly be ready to follow the hierarchy? So there's a little clue in there, and that clue is found in the word ready. You have to be ready to follow hierarchy. He says, perhaps thy readiness is only up to the first turn, up to the first step. Only where the hierarchy can help. In other words, it's like we come onto the path and we have teachers and co-workers and beautiful people there to travel with us and to, take both of our elbows and help us get, to the, at least up to the first step. And then all of a sudden we're left on our own. Think of Mother Teresa. After she reached that first step, then look at all the work she had to do, and she felt like she was left alone. Wilt thou not forget at a difficult hour, or wilt thou remember hierarchy only in abundance? It's like most of us studied with Torquem Serdarian. Not everybody, but most of us, and if not in this lifetime, in previous lifetimes. When he passed, he didn't pass in our hearts. He's still with us. He still talks to us. He's still very much present and very much alive. Abundance was when he was alive. Abundance was when we could attend all of his lectures and he could scream and yell at us and shape us and send us letters and love us and get cranky with us. That was abundance. But will you not forget at a difficult hour, or will you remember hierarchy only in abundance? The verse goes on. I haven't even gotten to the... I know there's so much in there. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's so invoking. At the very beginning of the teaching, this is when we first stepped onto the path. And when he says at the very beginning of the teaching, what this really means is when life became a capital L, no longer the little L. Little L life is when you just try to get through the day. Life now means fire. You've come alive, you're aware, you're conscious. That's the teaching. The teaching is life. So he's saying at the very beginning of the teaching, you were amazed more than once. Excuse me. You were amazed more than once at the turnings and deviations of even those near to you. Yeah, we've all seen that. It's like it's like, can I say this? We're born again into the aura, into the magnificence, into the currents of energy that flow from hierarchy, and we're born into this new current of life, and that we see someone going out the door and leaving. And he says, you were amazed more than once at the turnings and deviations of those near to you. You can understand the full sorrow of seeing how, upon the threshold, the pupil often runs swiftly away into the forest. he says, but my hand is constantly with the one who walks in complete readiness. So he was saying those that deviate and run swiftly into the forest are just not yet ready. But his hand is constantly with us, those who walk in complete readiness. We're never abandoned. So the focus of this morning's talk will be upon love and self-perfectment and readiness. Just so we are all in the same place of understanding, let me give some definitions, starting with the word love. Most people, when they're asked the question, well, what does love mean to you? Well, it's mom and dad. It's my grandmother. It's my husband. It's a lot of sex. This is all love. This is what people think love is. And I really love those that love me, but I don't love my enemies. That is a level of love. That's what humanity in general think and define love as. However, the Agni Yoga community would define love in this way, most essentially. Love is freedom from jealousy. Love is freedom from jealousy. Love is freedom from limitations. Love is freedom from self-interest. See that? Love is freedom from jealousy, from limitations, and from self-interest. That's true love. It is now we get into a little wordiness here. It is the magnetic energy radiating from the divine spark in man. What does that mean? When you see the light in someone's eyes, it is the radiation of the divinity of their soul. The magnetic energy coming from their heart. It is the communion. Love is the communion with the Almighty Presence in each living form. So where you can see your enemy, and your enemy is an attacker. We've read about the enemies of great ones and how they sustain their love of that enemy. That's love, how Agni Yoga defines love. Self-Perfectment. Self-Perfectment means the perfecting of ourselves in light of our true self. It means the perfecting of ourselves in the light of our true self. Perfectment is a steady and continuous effort to surpass our level and enter into higher and higher levels of consciousness and beingness. The most important point to remember on the path of self-perfectment is not to allow your sense of perfection to become your limitation. What does this mean? It's like, one example always comes to mind with this is that most of you are in a meditation course. And you love the meditation course, but it takes you months to write a paper, months to write a report. And you say, I just keep working on it, and it's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. That's when self-perfection becomes your limitation. Why is that a limitation? Because you're losing the rhythm of meditation. You're losing the rhythm. So, in other words, once you reach a level of perfection, some believe, that's it, I know, I don't need to improve. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at what I've done. But in reality, there is no ultimate perfection. This has taken me quite a while, to really grasp and understand. So I'm trying to explain it. In reality, there is no ultimate perfection on the infinite path of progress. You cannot take your accomplishments from last year or 20 years ago or even 50 years ago if you're that old or older and say, I don't need to improve myself. I'm there. I've done it. If you're still typing in an IBM typewriter, you're stuck in the past. If you say, like so many did for a period of time, no, I don't want anything to do with the internet, you're really behind. You're limiting yourself. So in reality, there is no ultimate perfection on the infinite path of progress. We must continue to evolve and progress and stay up to date. Perhaps when we think of a master, a Mahashohan, Kohan, a Rishi, the lords of Shambhala, then we can think of the greatest perfectment. Then we can think of the greatest perfectment of achievement as a vision for us. But in such thinking, we need to realize still that perfection is only a station where we wait for a few minutes and then take off for higher stations. People oftentimes believe that once they reach a certain age in life, they have reached the end of perfection. But if that were so, there would be no karma, no continuity of consciousness, no evolution. Life does not end with the physical body. We are on an infinite path. And then the word self, capital S self. What is the capital S self? The true self is the developing, unfolding human soul who is trying to liberate himself, to go back to the tower and become his true self. What is the tower? The tower is the Father's home. People believe that if they have loved or if they have a good working knowledge of the subject of love, then they are love itself. Their beingness is love. But what love is free from jealousy? You're going to be tested. Some situation will come into your life to test if you have jealousy or not. And then what are you going to do? Where is your love? What love is free from jealousy? What love is free from some element of possessiveness? This is my husband. This is my dog. Doesn't belong to you. My husband certainly doesn't belong to you. Or anybody. He's mine. Well, be careful. What love is free from fear? Fear of loss, fear of death, fear of change, fear of change. Love is freedom from jealousy, freedom from limitation, and freedom from self-interest. So love and the self are two sides of one coin. If we look at our puppies, they love us with every cell on their body. They never had to define love. But what kind of love does a puppy have? Territorial. It is territorial love. Their territorial love is very devotional, But once an intruder comes into their territory, then jealousy rules. Children, take the love of a young child who is, let's say, at the age of 3 years old. He loves his mom and dad, his grandparents, his godparents. What kind of love does he have? He has a secure love. He loves security. The love he receives from his family provides him with security, tenderness, good food, warmth, joy, and lots of fun time. He doesn't need to share too much. Love means security to him. However, later, as he engages in relationships outside of his family, love takes on new meanings. It may mean having to share his toys. It may mean time away from mom and dad, from his grandparents. That child may now have to do something for that love. It may mean having to clean his room. It may mean eating all of his dinner, or to go to bed before he wants to, and so forth. Soon love takes on certain conditions and requirements. But it is these very conditions that creates an environment of striving. Striving to be better in love. Striving to be economical. Striving in gratitude. Striving toward organization. Striving to share. All of these kinds of strivings in love helps him to evolve to a deeper understanding of love. If, however, his striving is forced, his striving will not be a heart-centered striving. It will not be creative. It becomes mechanical, perfunctory. He may learn to resent this kind of striving, or simply perform what is expected of him without any spirit of understanding. This is something all parents and grandparents and teachers must learn. You cannot force someone to strive toward perfectment, for eventually that person will rebel. There will be no heart substance to their striving. Striving towards self-perfectment must be inspired by your heart, by love, by the master in the heart. The master in the heart is the fire of life within, and this is why the teaching is life. When you say you love the teaching, that means your heart is on fire with life itself. The master in the heart. A fire which awakens your consciousness and inspires you to sacrifice everything to achieve higher levels of freedom, goodness, and beauty. When an adult seeks the path of self-perfectment, it is indicative that their heart nature is unfolding. They become inspired to surpass who they are and the levels of achievement that they have accomplished. This is what it means to be an adult, a grown-up, on the path. The person is no longer satisfied with their life. This kind of striving is the result of heart inspiration. See those 12 petals of the heart. Somewhere, 1 or 2 or 3 of those petals are unfolding. The verse stated, "What is love without self-sacrifice?" This aspect of self is the pseudo-self, the not self. If a person loves without sacrifice. The true self is that part of our nature which is seeking return to the Father's home. He knows that to return to the Father's home requires self-perfectment. We can't stay the same. He must perfect his little self and make it ready for its return. So this part of the verse indicates that for the human soul to evolve, it's going to have to learn sacrificial love. What is sacrificial love? It is a sacred love. Sacrificial love is a sacred love. It is a dependable love. It is a love without fear, without jealousy, without limitation, without self-interest. And at the end of the verse, it said, from the very beginning of the teaching, you are amazed more than once at the turnings and deviations made of even those close to you. You can understand the full sorrow of seeing how a student on the threshold runs swiftly into the forest. He said, the master said, my hand, however, stays with the traveler who strives onward with complete readiness. When one travels the path of self-perfect, no, sorry. I think it's called being tongue-tied. I'm not sure. So let me start again. When one travels the path of self-perfectment, that person is going against the flow of the current of the river of humanity, the current of the ordinary life. It takes courage to be on the path of self-perfectment. This courage means that we are now living a life in accord with living ethics, in accord with the capital S self, in accord with the almighty presence in the universe. When one begins to deviate and turn from the teaching is when that person's heart is no longer sensitive to the call of the tower, to Shambhala, the Father's home. Their mechanical life is now calling them to return to their old habits, their self-interest, their personal pleasures and desires, their desire for personal power, possessions, and positions. To ready ourselves to return to the Father's home means we must first be born in the fire of life. Our spirit must be awakened. It is then we begin to walk this path of self-perfectment. It is then we ready ourselves to serve something or someone greater than ourselves. The plan of humanity, hierarchy. We enter then the path of spiritual discipline. It is here at the close of the verse that states, my hand is constantly with you who walks in complete readiness. The guiding hand is the uplifting hand. The indicating hand is the hand revealing the path to the highest law. Thus is created the great step of the law of hierarchy. And let me close with this. The verse said, burdened by knowledge, but unwinged. That's such a hard word to say. unwinged, without wings. You might have wings, but they're no longer functioning, right? Burdened by knowledge, but unwinged will be those who are heartless. When you hear someone recite memorized verses from the teaching, and they live opposite what they have memorized, they are unwinged. Winged. They are unwinged. Am I pronouncing it right? Sort of. They're without heart. The verse says, even the most patient of people, the most valiant, the most striving will remain like cold coffins if they are heartless. It was interesting. It's been interesting past few months for myself, having lost my son and then my little puppy, to see the responses. I could immediately see and tell the people that were unwinged versus those that spoke from the heart. It was amazing. What an education. What an education. So what is heartlessness? Well, it is a disease. The person's heart center dries up. This oftentimes happens, I know it firsthand, when a close member of my family, his wife died, and he was never the same. He went from being a happy, joyful, loving man to totally isolating himself. It's like he became frozen. A cold coffin. That's heartlessness. This is why it is a disease. And it can happen any time an event occurs in our life if we don't understand the underlying cause of that event. So it is a disease. Heartlessness is a disease. The person's heart center dries up. The petals of the heart, those 12 petals of the heart, become petrified, and their heart becomes like a rock. Such people are recognized by 5 signs. These are the most recognizable. First, they become indifferent to human suffering, not to their own, but to human. They become indifferent to the suffering of others and the pain of others. The second sign is they're led by their ego and vanity. The third sign is insanity, mental imbalance. The fourth sign is that they are a hypocrite. And the fifth sign is obscene. Such a person's soul is in danger of becoming lost in darkness. So let me end with this. The one with heart is the one who is traveling on the infinite path of self-perfectment. This is the one who is increasingly sacrificial in their love. They serve to bring light, love, and beauty into humanity, into their family, into their friendships, and into their life's work. They are a fearless person. They become I lost it. It's happening again. They have become a fearless person who is ready to risk their life for the cause of a higher value or principle. And in so doing, they become a stream of joy. Do you have any questions? We have time for questions. Do you have any questions? You know, having questions is a sign, first of all, that you listened. There's a listener. Okay. Yeah, what's your question?
Can people believe that they have heart and don't know that they don't?
Yes. The question is, can people believe they have heart and they don't? What do you do? What do you do with someone like that is heartless? It's very, very difficult to reach them because their life is typically immersed in knowledge. And what happens is that they begin to infect themselves with that knowledge. It is like knowledge is not necessarily from book reading, but from people who have planted seeds of doubt in their life, in their consciousness, in these various situations. And those seeds of doubt begin to infect, like put a poison into their belief system, into their thinking, into their process. And it begins to petrify the petals of the heart. So this is why we must be very, very careful not to let contrary people, contrary cultures, contrary ideas, or enemies to pull us into their network of understanding and to where we become infected with that network of understanding. We have to be very careful with that. Mm-hmm.
Why would the master reject someone's striving?
Okay, the question of why would the master reject someone's striving? Because that striving is based on self-interest. Selfish interest. Personal growth for the sake of self. See, I don't have enough time to go. Isn't this an amazing verse? You know, again, it's verse 75 in the book Heart, in the Agni Yoga series.